Greetings, Hunters. This is Yumo from Yumo Gaming, and welcome back to another Monster Hunter World Iceborne video. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the small details that we learned during the various gameplay demos that were present during E3 2019. Unfortunately, there was no real big reveals there, like a new monster being teased and all that. But we did get some small details if you looked deep enough. And since I'm one of those people that do like to look deep into the stuff that we see, I noticed a few things, and this is just kind of a list of the stuff I've noticed. Now, let's get right into the video and not waste any time. So, the first one that I noticed, and it's pretty simple, and I'm sure everybody noticed this, is that they have, in fact, added a photo mode to Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter World is a beautiful game, and I have seen a lot of people on forums and Reddit and stuff requesting stuff like this, and myself included, because it will help me create better, unique thumbnails for it. So, yeah, I am happy to have it. It's a nice addition. Let's just move on to the next detail. There's not really much more to say about that. So, this next detail isn't a big thing, really. It's more of a correction to something that I made in my previous video. In my story analysis video that I made regarding Monster Hunter World story trailer, I talked about how when we got to see various parts of Seliana, in this screenshot here, I proposed that this could be like this, like the stockpile where we could buy like our Astera jerky, stuff like that, with just your Zenny, right? But what this actually is, this person, he's actually in charge of managing the supplies that go to and from Seliana and going to Astera. So he manages the things that we don't have in Seliana, specifically the Botanical Research Center and the Argosy. So if those two things you won't find present in Seliana, but that person there will be able to offer those same details so that you don't have to go back to Astera just for those two things. So before we leave Seliana, we also get to see the Steamworks being used. The minigame itself is hard to describe because honestly, looking at it without actually trying it myself, and because they were having controller difficulties, not really sure how you're meant to play it. But depending on how good you do, you get a whole bunch of rewards, so it's nice. And even with their controller difficulties that they were having in the demo that I watched for that part, they actually got themselves a pretty decent stack of rewards. So that's pretty good. Looks like we'll be able to get a lot of stuff from the Steamworks. So the next detail we need to look at is to do with the equipment that they were showing us before they prepped in the hunt. There's a few things I noticed. First off, Master Rank equipment seemed to be separated from the previous rank's equipment by having a plus sign next to it. This makes me wonder if we'll be getting a return of alpha and beta sets, or if we're just going to have just one set all across the board for Master Rank armor. Because remember, the whole point of alpha and beta was we have these two different types of sets you can choose from, but now they just have plus. Are they going to go with plus and maybe plus? I don't know. I'm not going to say minus, because that makes it sound like it'd be worse than the base version. But yeah. Another thing to note about these armors is that the armor skills and decoration slots that you see are not final for this demo. They like to keep that kind of stuff secret, because you got to remember, going through Monster Hunter World's vanilla experience up until now, whenever new armor was introduced, that was some of the stuff that people got hyped up about the most after the new monsters, is the new armor, and they would look to see whether how it would fit into the various metas. And Capcom understands this, and so they're not going to spoil all the various armor skills for us now before the game's even out. So no, that stuff isn't final. The one thing that they did show is that mantles will now have decoration slots in them. Now, we're not sure if these decoration slots will only be active when you have the mantles equipped, or and by that I mean you're wearing them, or if you're just having them on your person to be able to be worn, and they can be that there's always active, I guess. But I like the idea of the latter, of them being always active, because it adds more build diversity. And depending on how they balance out which mantles get how many decoration slots of what size, they could theoretically make it so that the weaker mantles that we never really use anymore, like the Vitality Mantle or the Glider Mantle, they can potentially make those things viable for builds just to have the decoration slots. And then if you already have them in your equipment, then you might use them, you know? So hopefully they do some balancing there. So as we pop into the hunt, it's just your basic stuff. But in this, we're just kind of focusing on the first gameplay demo because the other ones just reiterate it with the different monsters' movesets. And we can notice a few things throughout the whole Hoarfrost Reach maps, but that's going to be for another video. But as we pop into the hunt here in the first video, which is kind of where we start to see these details, we get to see the Raider Ride in action for the first time in actual gameplay. And we're introduced to the Hoarfrost Reach native tail rider species, the Wulg. Wulgs seem to be a small fanged wyvern, though some people are speculating it could be a fanged beast. I just think it's a small fanged wyvern covered in fur to match the environment, but that's just me. And the one thing I got a question about this is that it's basically like a Jagros or a Gyros or a Shamos. So is it going to be like the Jagros to Gyros where they have a great version of it? Like aka the Great Wulg as a large monster for the early game of the Hoarfrost Reach? Or is it going to be more of the Shamos route where it's just it itself? You know, it's just an endemic life. It doesn't have a greater version. I'm actually hoping that they do have a Great Wulg and that back in the Coral Highlands they actually create like a Great Shamos. Because that would be nice, you know, just having some more monster varieties even if they share the same skeleton. As for the skeleton, I think that if there is going to be a Great Wulg, judging by the tails on these smaller Wulgs, I would say that they would be of the same skeleton as Tobi-Kadachi and a Dogoran. Now, as for the functions of the Raider Rider itself, we learn that you can do everything on a Raider Ride other than attack with your weapon. And yes, this means that when it comes to hunting prep, you can in fact sharpen your weapon. I had in that same story trailer analysis and the follow-up video, when I was talking about the Raider Ride, I was questioning whether or not we could sharpen our weapons because that's something that requires like balance in two hands. And I wasn't sure if that was something we could pull off in a Raider Ride. But yeah, in fact, you can sharpen while you're in the weapon, and that alone makes it really good because you could be in the middle of the fight, monster goes to a new zone, you want to follow the monster right away, you hop on a Raider Ride and then you just start sharpening while you're on the move. And so that is a pretty good quality of life. We also get to learn more about how the Clutch Claw works in this demo. Obviously, it's for Iceborne, right? Now, the Clutch Claw, it can be used at any time, but you need to be careful when you use it because the Clutch Claw does not make you immune to damage. So while on the monster or on your way to the monster, you can still get hit or roared off. And this makes it so that you're actually very vulnerable when you're using the Clutch Claw. So you have to time it right. This is why in the various demos of the Clutch Claw that they showed for all the weapon videos, the monster was always exhausted. Or you know, incapable of fighting back. And this is why you have to time it right. So yeah, that's nice. We also get to see the what happens when you weaken a monster's parts to make it so that you do more damage to them. The monster gets a white visual effect on the part that you weakened, and then when you attack that part with your weapon, you get these like 4 yellow dots that surround your damage numbers, kind of like a target reticle, to kind of tell you that you're hitting a spot that's been weakened. So you got 2 things there in the UI just to, well, one's not really the UI, one's on the monster, but you get 2 things in-game to kind of tell you this is a weak spot and whether or not you're hitting it. So that's nice. So the next thing I want to bring up is the environmental hazards of the Hoarfrost Reach. Specifically, I'm talking about it if you're fighting in areas with the cliffs made of ice, like you can see here, portions of the zone actually collapse underneath you. We see this when they're mounting the Tigrex here, as Tigrex is going on his rampage from the mount. He actually causes the ice to collapse. And when the ice collapses, you fall down to a lower zone, which is icy caves, which we now know for a fact are returning, which is something veterans kind of speculated. Because when it comes to Monster Hunter and cold zones, those zones usually have icy caves to them. So this is nothing that we didn't well, I say we. I'm still fairly new to the series, but it's nothing that the Monster Hunter community didn't expect. And so, yeah, that's cool. We get our confirmation. But it also means that you got to be very careful when you're hunting. Like, you could also potentially trap whatever you're hunting and have it happen like with Rathlos and its nest with that dam. You could theoretically, if you timed it right, cause the thing to collapse while the monster's on it and make the monster drop to a zone below, which would be kind of cool to do. So the final thing I want to bring up is that Capcom is adding dynamic monster difficulty into Iceborne. Now what I mean by that is not that, oh, if you keep on dying to a monster, the monster will get easy, or no, nothing like that. Basically, they are firstly adding a new 2-player difficulty to the scaling of a monster. Previously, there was only the single-player version and the multiplayer version, and the multiplayer version was scaled for a full party of 4 people. Now, they are going to be having a single-player version, a 2-player version, and a 4-player version. So, yes, it'll still be a little bit harder if you play on with only 3 people, because it'll scale up to the 4-people version. But still, it is a little, it's going to be a lot easier for the people that just play in a group of 2. But the other thing that they're doing is that they're adding a dynamic scaling so that if you are hunting by yourself, this is a good example. You're hunting by yourself, and then somebody in your session decides to join you in your hunt. That's perfectly fine. In doing so, they raised the difficulty for the monster from a single-player monster to a multiplayer monster. And then something happens. They either leave the hunt because they got a rage quit, or they disconnected because, let's face it, sometimes Monster Hunter World servers are pretty crap. And this causes them to like drop out of the session or whatever. And then you're stuck by yourself fighting a monster that's been geared for multiplayer when, obviously, like I said, you by yourself. What they're doing now is that in situations like that, when somebody from your party drops and they leave, the monster will actually go back down to the corresponding difficulty. Like, going from 4 to 3 won't change anything because they would have the same difficulty. But if you had 3 people in your party and one of them dropped out, it would drop down to the 2-person difficulty. And if you have 2 people in your party and one of them, the other person dropped out, it would just go down to a single-player difficulty for the monster. And so I'm of mixed opinion of this. One, I understand it completely. That whole thing about having playing by myself, having someone that's in my session join me and then leave, is something that's happened a little bit more than I can count. Especially earlier on in Monster Hunter, when the servers were, since I play on PC, everyone that's played on PC since launch, that at launch, its servers were pretty crap, like even worse than they are now. It was kind of impossible to play multiplayer. So, I understand completely for those who have that kind of frustration. On the other hand, removing the 2-player difficulty and making it so that that difficulty does not adjust, like it adjusts automatically, means that you cannot fight a hard mode version of the monster. Now you're stuck with a monster that is appropriately leveled to your people. It's scaled for how many people you have. A lot of people would group up in groups of 2, or heck, have someone join them and then drop out, just for that extra difficulty of saying that they beat the monster in the hardest form it possibly has. And like you have to understand, there are people like that are really hardcore about difficulty. And those people are kind of getting the short end of the stick here, because now they don't have really the option for the hard mode anymore. Like, the hardest difficulty a monster is going to be is that there's 3 of you, and there has to always be 3 of you. You can't just have 3 of you and drop out because it scales down again. So I'm of mixed opinion of that. But anyway, this is all I really wanted to talk about here. There are other little details that I've missed in the videos and the various gameplays. In fact, I still have to watch a couple of them because I was at work during a couple of those VODs. But you know, they were mostly just hunts of stuff that we've seen before. Nothing new. I was checking the news to see if anything big popped up. Nothing really did. So yeah, like this is the things that I notice. But like I said, there's stuff that I missed. So if you have stuff that you noticed that I didn't mention here, leave them down in the comments down below. We can have a discussion about it. If you like the video, leave a like. If you dislike the video, leave a dislike. Once again, let me know what you have to say in the comments. And as always, let the Sapphire Star light your way. Later, hunters.